All right, welcome to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the bead and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. Today's white lightning is very strong coffee because I still don't feel good, which is why we didn't record yesterday. I assume it's not a withdrawal headache because I assume that if I was going to get those, if I was that bad, that I would have gotten them within the first couple of days. And it's just
Uh,
not sleeping
yeah,
well.
that's one of those that I've seen conflicting papers on. But uh, anytime you're straining your brain, which
Hmm.
resisting a temptation strains your brain, you potentially set yourself up for a headache in any way.
Oh,
But
well, uh, Lord of Chaos, because my brain is chaotic, and the Wheel of Time usually gets the brain juices flowing. Um, so we've got about 100 pages here. Not about, actually. It's we left off on 376 and we're hopefully going to 466. Um, brain, that's 90. Okay, I know math. Inverse Polish notation. I can do it.
all right.
So we got a big chunk of Rand here. Um,
So did Avienda.
yeah, or that's still happening. So that's still part of what's going on here. Um,
Well, realistically, so did Alana.
eh.
Well,
Well,
anytime he gets jiggy, she's gonna feel it. So, I mean, it's like you're there.
presumably so presumably she has enough experience that she could block it out, but she's
But does
green,
she? That's
so
only if she wants to.
does she want to? All right. Speaking of MILFs, Dylan and the other Andorans. Um,
Wait, quick
so
question from the show. Remind me, was it Myril we meet or Alana we meet?
is Alana the Indian lady with the nice boobs is Alana.
Okay, that's what I was wondering because I knew we met a green and they made a big deal about a lot of stuff that never happened in the books, but
Hmm.
I couldn't remember if it was Myril or Alana because both of them are like the most prominent greens we meet other than Cadsuane.
Yeah, yeah. Um, we meet Alana, but we never met Varen, did we? I don't think so. I don't
No,
think
but
they ever
there's a
pointed
there's
out.
a speculated actress that looks the part for
Okay.
season 2, which hey, that great, awesome, and actually, she does look the part.
Well, the question is, do they actually write the part? Okay, so
Um,
this chapter 16 could be a doozy of a rabbit hole. Um, because of what it's talking about, tellings of the wheel. Um, which I'm well, first of all, Rand is thinking how nice it is when the Enderan nobles get there, how nice it is to have people who talk directly without all this scheming, which is true, but we do see later that, well, and we've already seen from Morgase and Elaine, they know how to play the game.
mhm.
Um, they just
Play it differently.
they play it differently. And when it comes to, you know, when it comes to certain things, it's it's the difference between uh having a rigid code and having strong principles. So they'll kind of bend and go with the flow. They'll play the game, in areas where it's minor, where it's just detail. But when it comes to something big, like if we consider you an usurper, telling telling the Dragon Reborn directly, if we consider you an usurper, if you don't leave, we're gonna come after you. We don't care if we're all going to die. Telling him to his face. That's a hard line. They're not going to play a game with that because to them, that's the most important thing in their life is, their country, its traditions, its ruler. Uh, uh,
Well, that that
which
that that you know to our point about they still play the game, that still leaves a lot of room for play though, because there's a big line between we don't like you and we're going to try to undermine you between and you're an usurper. There's a lot of wiggle room inside that.
Well, yeah, but telling him directly that we will come at you directly, you know.
Well, but I think that if you are playing the game, that's part of the game. Because if I set that line so far down there and there's so much wiggle room inside of it, I guarantee you I'm going to use your lack of vigilance from my statement to play within that line a lot
But
more.
I think it's pretty clear that that's not what they're doing. That they are, you know, speaking openly and bluntly. And it's a contrast with the Karhinen, who, at least before the Civil War, before the Aiel came, that they didn't have those principles. It was all about personal power. That was their principle. And I'll try not to go off on any, you know, real world examples of this, but that's a problem when you have someone who yeah, maybe this person's going to scratch my back. Maybe this person is going to do things that I want them to do. But ultimately, what they are doing is helping themselves. Any benefit you get is secondary. And we see that early on with the scheming, and it 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 doesn't matter how the people suffer. It almost doesn't matter how the country suffers. We can throw the country into turmoil and it doesn't matter because I want to be the king. So I'm going to scheme and I'm going to bring him down. Um, okay. But now the rabbit hole. So where is it? Where he stops Dylan here on 384. All right, so when they're leaving and he gets his little history lesson that we already know all this. Jordan has already given us all these pieces, but now he's laying them all out in a line, both for us to, you know, if you haven't put them all together yourself, and also for Rand, that all these pieces here connect, and here's the chronology of who his mother was. We had already figured out, we the reader knew when um oh gosh, why is my brain not working? Rourke's wife, the wise one, when she was telling Rand the story of his mother,
Mm-hmm.
because she knew her because she was a maiden at the time.
Yeah, Amos.
Amos, when she was telling the story of Shail, we knew that was Tigraine because we
Mm-hmm.
had already heard that part of the story from another perspective. Um, I can't remember who told that earlier. I want to say it was in the girl storyline for some reason. But we had already seen that part of the story. And so now he's laying it out, and um what kind of he's gonna have this moment again, but here we go. Okay, so 386 is when he's thinking what a convoluted web the wheel is weaving. Um, Everything folded back into itself in endless circles. Tigraine went to the west in secret, which made Layman Demodred cut down Avendor, a gift of the Aiel, to make a throne, an act which brought the Aiel across the spine of the world to kill him. That had been their only goal, though the nations called it the Aiel War. And the Aiel came, and with the Aiel came a maiden named Shail, who died giving birth. So many lives changed, lives ended, so she could give birth to him at the proper time and place and die doing it. Carrie Thor was the mother he remembered, if dimly, yet he wished he could have known Tigraine or Shail or whatever she wanted to call herself, even if for only a little while, just to have seen her. But then he gets all morose and useless dreaming, and he and Luce Theron have a little conversation uh, about futility. Um,
I don't know what the rabbit hole is, but
the
uh
the
the this is one of those things when we talk about our religious discussions and then we're talking about this is good and evil versus God and not God, right? They call it the creator, but all these events were not good. So what is it? Is the creator separate from the wheel? And we've speculated on this in the past, especially after book one at the end, where he says, I won't take part. Is the creator separate from the wheel? And therefore, is he even, or I'm saying to personify, but is
mhm.
it even with the dark one? Or is it the actual creator and responsible for everything? Because good versus evil versus a creator and a usurper are two different things. And personally, I think in this world, in this metaphysic, the creator, it's not really the creator. The wheel is the creator. The creator that they're calling it is the part that likes what the wheel is. And the other part is the part that wants to break it.
Well, I think in their mythos, in their what little we hear about the Genesis story of this world is the creator created the wheel, and at the moment of creation used the wheel and the weave to bind the dark one, to imprison the dark one. Now, where the dark one came from, who knows? And how exactly
So
that
so they
works, who
were like a yin
knows?
and yang spectral
Uh-huh.
entity at some point, and the creator created this world, but wanted to keep the dark one out of it in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah. So I was actually gonna this leads into our talk about the flood, because I was gonna go into this a little more there about how I think we really see and I can't remember what church denomination he went to. Um, I want to say it was a Methodist, and I don't know a ton about their theology, but I think we see a lot of
It's like Lutheran
Robert
light.
Jordan's. Yeah, I think we see a lot of Jordan's uh, theology in this. The idea of so I've talked before about so a lot of the founding fathers that people call deists weren't actually deists. They had a different conception of God, of the Bible, than a lot of modern Protestant evangelicals of today do, which was the clockmaker analogy.
Mm-hmm.
God, the creator, made the clock, made the universe. He wound it, and then he let it go. He knows how it works because he's the clockmaker. He knows where the hands are going to go and how they're going to go because he's the clockmaker, but he doesn't need to do anything to it. Now there's a kind of an addendum to the clockmaker analogy, which is, but then every once in a while you got to go in there and you got to wind it again on an old-fashioned clock. You know,
Mm.
most people don't know this because we use our phones for our clocks, but if you have an old clock,
Still got to
grandfather
charge it.
clock, cuckoo clock, exactly, you you've got to wind it, you've got to reset the weights like on a cuckoo or a grandfather to keep it going and to make sure that it is on time. And so that was kind of the addendum to the clockmaker is, yes, he's the clockmaker, but every once in a while you got to get in there and you got to wind the clock. And that's where, the clock is running, but now the prophecies are going to be fulfilled, and here I come in the flesh, and that's Jesus. So in this analogy, what I'm seeing is the creator is the clockmaker, made the clock, or in this case, the weave. But then he has these mechanisms to directly affect things when needed, which is the sovereign.
Mm-hmm.
So this is, every once in a while, whether it's doing it directly or whether it's simply there's a difference between the creator making all these things happen and the creator giving certain people the ability to see what is going to happen because it's a weave, because you can see how the pattern is going. So there's a difference between making all these complicated things happen, all these, and that's what Rand's thinking about here is, and he goes deeper into it later, how many little pieces had to come together just so I could be born on Dragon Mount at this time. At this time, in the Io War, so that Tam could find me, so that he could take me away to fulfill the prophecy of from the old blood, but raised by the old blood from the older blood, or whatever it was. And all that led to, how complicated that weave was. Well, it's only complicated in, it's only in hindsight that you can connect those dots. History doesn't have dots. We make the dots when we look back on it.
Mm-hmm.
That's the other part of this, is that
Yeah, well,
Rand,
that's along the lines of our well, this didn't happen. The Enlightenment wasn't one event. It was all of these things that led to it. But we look at a time when it was an explosion of these events, and we call it a dot.
yes,
Yeah. Same thing with what we're talking about here, which is, maybe I'll save it for spoilers. But it was a comment about Min, but why I like Min so much in these books. But yeah, it is a spoiler at this point, so I'll leave it at that. But my thing was, it was the good and evil versus
mm-hmm.
versus
Right,
the,
and
because if these are predestined, fated events, are they? It's not necessarily good. I mean, unless you got to redefine good. If redefining good is what ends up with the positive result after 3,000 years,
mm-hmm.
then yes, okay, so now it is the good versus evil. But if the individual events matter, well, now we're talking a different
Well,
story.
that's a good point. I wasn't even thinking about that. Is we're looking here in Rand's storylines of these next numerous books, that of how he's ending up in a dark place, because that's immediately where his mind is going. He's not looking at the end result yet. His words were, how many people had to die, how many people had to suffer just so I could be born. And it's,
Which is great in these books, because we talk about fleshing out characters. That is a good indicator of his goodness, his genuineness, because a Machiavellian type would only be thinking about the end product. Not even, and we associate that with just fame and everything. No, if that same personality type, if they have a goal, then that's the only thing that matters. And everything else can go in. The Dexter's a great example of that, right? He had his code about, these murderers, and he had these skills that would help him find them. It didn't matter about everything else. He wasn't trying to be famous and everything, but he had the same psychopathic personality type. If Rand was that way, then he wouldn't even have these thoughts. These wouldn't be hangups for him. His biggest flaw is his hangups, but that's also his biggest strength. Yeah.
Yes, because not and where it becomes self-defeating, and putting himself into a negative feedback loop is, not only is he thinking, how many people had to die and suffer just so I could be born, but then he has guilt about it. He feels responsible for it, because he was the end product, because all he's seeing is this point, all of this suffering that had to happen up to here. It takes him a while, and this is where, as you say, leave it for spoilers, or leave it for when it happens. This is where it's so important that Min comes back into the picture, because this is what she adds to him. And that was something else I was thinking when I was getting ready for these chapters is, and we talked about this quite a bit last time, is that Rand needs that feminine influence, because he didn't have it growing up, and he doesn't have it now. That was something I hadn't considered before, is here where he starts to go into a negative place. It's not because of these people. They're just doing what they think is best, but Bashir and Bale, they're not going to give him that counterpoint that he needs, because they're much like him. They have their own counterpoints. They have their own wives who give them that counterpoint, so that they are balanced in and of themselves. But when they're with Rand, the wives aren't there. I mean, well, Bale's is sometimes because she's a wise one, but they're only adding to his overly masculine, personality and outlook. So he's not getting that balance. And that's a major part of the wheel. And that's, I'm thinking of a particular scene, but that's the whole idea of the wheel, of the yin and yang symbol
Mhm.
is balance. And that comes up frequently in the series, is this idea of balance.
Which is funny because on this reread and going through it, we had never been exposed to personalities such as like Jordan Peterson or something. And when we really dive into the Wheel of Time, it's never been more clear that Jordan was really talking about not good and evil, but chaos and order.
Hmm.
And so if anybody in the audience wants an example of that, read his work. Don't listen to what the media says about him. Or you can even separate the work from his personal comments. But the balance of chaos and order is the world, whereas the creator is probably all order, whereas all chaos would really suck for a lot of people. So, except for Ashamal, because he's a nihilist. He's our Nietzsche.
Hmm.
I thought we
Okay.
were having a religious discussion today, so I figured I'd troll you with a little Nietzsche in front of me. But
Oh, no trolling. He had some interesting thoughts. It's
well, I think it's Douglas Murray. He says, if you're someone said in an interview with him, they said, well, you can judge a lot about somebody by whether they like or don't like Nietzsche. And he said, no, I think you can judge a lot about somebody, but by what parts of Nietzsche they like or don't
mm,
like.
yeah.
And it's not something I've read all the way through, but it's something you dabble in every once in a while, because otherwise you also go a little crazy if you try to go all the way through in one go. It's also a heavy, dense read.
All right. And
We completely derailed, didn't we? You said rabbit
no,
hole. I
yeah.
wanted to comply.
Yeah. That I mean that was the whole point of that. Both the discussion and I think the scene. I think that was a big point of the scene, is I kind of think Jordan wanted your brain to go down these rabbit holes. I mean, I think that's why he created such a complex story, is he wanted your brain to go down these, right? And he kind of said these things when he would, when he would answer questions, uh when he would talk about, the millions of pages of notes that he had, and you've got hundreds of thousands of words in each of these books. So I think he wanted to go down these rabbit holes. Um, yeah, it ends with something sadly amusing though, with uh with him thinking about Avienda, because she comes in at the end of the chapter, and Light, he thought disgustedly, wanting Avienda and Elaine when he knew he could have neither. You're worse than Matt ever thought of being. Even Matt had the sense to stay away from a woman if he thought he would harm her. Uh,
Yeah, we get that from inside his own mind. Although he does seem to forget the fact that he is a targeted person every time he does come across a new girl he wants to get, cozy with. But
yeah, yeah. Well, this is where this is where he needs um that feminine influence, because there's a reason we have, well, not just analogies, the mama bear analogy, but just the literal uh mama bear or mama human.
Mhm.
and the links they will go to for protectiveness is because men inherently, we want to accomplish things. We want to do things. Women remind us that those things need to be in service of our the positive instinct we have of protectiveness, that those things we do and accomplish need to be in service of wife and children, family and community. That's what makes them worthwhile. Yes, any woman you love, any woman you're close to is going to be in danger, but it's also why you're doing what you're doing. That's something that he kind of gets from Bashir, especially, who kind of becomes, he has these surrogate fathers when he leaves the Two Rivers that do different things for him. That was one of our big complaints about the stupid series is, why didn't you take 15 seconds to show Lan teaching them how to fight?
Mhm.
Because it sets up the fact that they are going to be warriors through the series, and it also sets up that surrogate father relationship with Lan and Rand.
And you had a roadmap. They did it in fucking Lord of the Rings with Boromir showing the, and then you see a little bit of attachment there, even though he was very hostile to the hobbits to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
But he also
Mm-hmm.
realized, well, they're going to be here. I can't change that, so I might as well keep them from killing
which
themselves.
which makes that scene, even though you know he's gonna die because he's Sean Bean and he always dies, it makes that scene so
Didn't come
impactful.
out the eyes though. Didn't come out the eyes.
Yeah. So, and then he has Rourke, and then now he has Bashir, and so he gets that a little bit from Bashir, whenever there's interaction with his wife. Uh, but being around the few times Rand is around his wife or the wives of the officers, it always makes him uncomfortable. And that's the point. Yeah, because you don't have this and you need this.
And Rand is the penultimate CEO at some point.
Mm-hmm.
And Warren Farrell in his talking about his book The Boy Crisis, he talks about, he also does couple therapy counseling as well. And one of the disconnects and why the CEO attracts the wife, but also pushes them away at the same time, is all day, every day, you're getting basically presentations from everybody, and you're thinking about all the different solutions to the problems that are going on as you're listening to the presentation. Then you go home and your wife is venting about her day. Well, you automatically go into CEO mode and
Mm-hmm.
you start thinking about all the solutions to every problem she's bringing up. But she doesn't want to hear the solutions. She just wants to vent. And she wants to know that you listened. And Rand doesn't know that because he never had the female upbringing, the female influence, that he doesn't have that intuit nature, which it's, and so he doesn't know that he needs to just listen every once in a while. He doesn't, this is with the maidens. They just want him, they just want to show that they just want him to show that he is listening to them. It's not about fighting in the biggest battles. It's the fact that listen to how our culture is and how we are and understand that. And you have to show that you understand it. You can't just say, okay, yeah, I get it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is, they understand that. I mean, they're the ones that they were part of the ones saying, "Why are you wearing a sword? Are you gonna go, try and get what's his bucket yourself?" They were part of that. They know that because we're guarding you, that means we may not see the hottest fighting. We may not get that chance, but we're guarding you. What he's doing that's, pissing them off is he's actively keeping them from ever
Mhm.
fighting. And that's, no, you can't do that. There's a balance there. There's a line there, and he doesn't get it.
But the part of the underlying point there is he could keep them from danger if he did it in a way that still gave them the honor that they deserve.
Mhm.
And I mean, he could be the general in the battle with them as his honor guard and do like generals do and stay back.
to your analogy earlier, that what you've got to learn to do when the wife is venting is you can help, but you can't do it like the CEO. You can't say, okay, well, what you need to do is, no, you have to ask questions, you have to offer suggestions,
Hmm.
you know, to help with the problems. You can't just say, all right, here's what we're gonna do. No, that dynamic is not the same.
But you have to do it after you've acknowledged that you've heard
Mm.
everything that they've said, and that they're acknowledge their position in the whole
A-
thing.
And that's where the asking questions comes in, which is in any social
Well,
situation. and
it's the
and
steel man thing. You can steel man what they just said, and it shows that you listened to it.
Mhm.
Oh, so and so said this to me, and da 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 da. Oh, so one understanding is that you're pissed that she would do this thing that kind of called you out in front of everybody. Yeah, that's
So
exactly what I'm saying. So there's the back and forth there, and then you can start putting in a couple solutions here and there, maybe. Uh,
so it's interesting that you bring that up, and the and the thing about the maidens, because the next
hey, we
scene
can
that
always mix sexy time and salmon into any
exactly.
conversation.
Well, uh, but the next scene that jumps out at me is page 397. Okay, so this is when he comes across uh the women who are practicing with practice swords. They're learning the sword.
Mm.
Uh, and it makes Rourke groan, and it makes the maidens kind of seethe that they don't like it. And Rand gets it here because he tells Rourke, look, you don't like them. It's not the bastardization of uh of uh of your culture. It's not the bastardization of Giotto that's annoying you. It's the fact that they're Karhinen. You're gonna dislike them just because of who they are. Because you have this 20-year, well, hundreds of year history, because you go back to when they first 800 years when they first gave them the sapling, and then 20 years of the war. So you've got this long history with the Karhin and the tree killers, and it's ingrained in you people. So you're not gonna like it, uh, whatever. But look on the positive side. They're learning. They're reaching out. They're trying to meet you part way. And who knows? I think he kind of ends it with, who knows? Maybe something good will come from this.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's the balance between imitation is the best flattery and cultural appropriation. This is this, and you get it wrong is appropriation. But I'm trying to do this, and it comes out a little wrong. Well, it's still imitation at that point.
all right, I'm gonna get myself in trouble here because I
Oh,
have an
yeah, social distillation. You can do it. Go ahead.
I have an analogy. No, I'm gonna get myself in personal trouble.
Oh. Let me pause and pee first, while you can maybe get your words more precise, so you at least limit the damage.
All right,
All right.
so
Sorry for that hiccup, but I kind of want to hear what Heath has to say without having to think about my my bladder.
we use cooking as an analogy a lot,
Hmm.
um, because it's a really good example of, um, you have to know the rules before you can break the rules. And it's also a great example of cultural appropriation and how silly it is. Um, because especially for you and me, most of what we do is fusion cooking, simply because we're just throwing things together that we like and that we think taste good, right? So when we're kind of making up our own recipes, it's just because we're throwing stuff together that we like and that goes well. It's I always laugh and roll my eyes when people say, "Oh, that's not real Mexican food." Yeah, it's Tex-Mex. Yeah, it's different. It's Tex-Mex.
Hmm.
It's the blend of, you know, uh the Central American immigrants with uh the Mexicans who have been in Texas for generations, with the influx of, you know, US immigration, and then more European immigration, especially German, and it made something different and damn tasty, right? So uh I do fusion cooking all the time, and I do most of the cooking. And so My wife is fine with fusion cooking unless it's Asian, and then she gets mad at me because it's not right. Okay, so for instance, the other night, uh, she does this. There's this like stewed pork belly dish or braised pork belly that she does. She does it in the pressure cooker to make it super tender, fatty, fall aparty. And so it's pork belly and eggs, that boiled eggs that soak up this sauce. And then you serve it with rice and vegetables. And I like it. It's tasty, but pork belly's tasty because it's fatty. It doesn't have a lot of meat on it.
Mhm.
So when I'd set out this pork belly, because I wanted her to do this dish, I'd also set out some pork shoulder. And I said, throw some chunks of pork shoulder in there so it can have more protein. She didn't do that because that's not how the recipe works. That's wrong. So what she ended up doing, you know what char siu is? The kind of red pork that's like uh it's like chunks of pork that are like braised, and then you kind of brush them with this sauce, and you broil it so the sauce gets all, sticky good yumminess. You'd know it if you saw it. If you've ever been to like an Asian place and you've seen this really kind of bright red
Mhm.
pork, that's what it is. It's the sauce is what makes it the bright red. I can't remember what's in it. Um, so she did that instead and had that with the pork belly dish. And it made me think of it when you were talking about this scene and when you brought up cultural appropriation, because I always think of cooking when the idea of cultural appropriation comes up and how silly it is. And okay, so I guess you don't eat pizza then, huh?
Mhm.
Because almost all pizza is Sicilian New Yorker. It is not what was traditional Italian pizza.
Yeah, I had pizza in Venice, and it was quite a bit different.
Hmm.
And they charge you for silverware, by the way, if you're American.
Yeah. So they understand to an extent, uh, you know, the idea of having to work with the wetlanders, having to kind of integrate and work together to an extent. But then when it comes to, but not my thing, not in my backyard, not there's a blind spot there when it comes to, okay, well, but now they're, you know, specifically taking our thing and they're not doing it right. And to Rand's point, look, maybe doing it at least in part, who knows? Maybe you'll stop hating each other. Maybe you'll stop hating them because they're doing this. But even someone as rational and wise as Rourke has this blind spot because everyone has blind spots.
Mhm.
And he has been the the calmest, the least, you know, uh the least our tree killer, kill him of the Aiel, and even this gets under his skin.
I was kind of reading the interaction between him and Barrelane there, and that's the thing. Everybody's got something. You claim to be rational and you claim to be level headed, but there's something that offends you out there. We touched on it recently with the Scott commented about opening doors for girls and stuff. It's if you want to be offended, you're going to be offended. It
Hmm.
doesn't matter if there's a good or bad to it at all.
Hmm.
And Barrelanes keeps pointing out how deaths are down, how the actual negative effects of the duels that Andorans would fight were down, and all of these positive effects. And he's like, but it offends me, or offends my people. He spoke for everybody
Hmm.
there, but it.
And I think isn't that where Rand says they offend you just by being Karhinen, just by being tree killers? Um,
uh,
I think that's where he jumps in and kind of
yeah, yeah,
points that out.
yeah.
Yeah. Um,
But he also finishes it with a good line. Uh, who knows? Maybe they will eventually learn enough that you won't have to hate them.
yes. Yeah, I was trying to remember exactly how it was worded because I like that you won't have to hate them. The
Mm-hmm.
half there kind of really drives the point home of, well, because it's kind of silly on its face. You don't have to hate anyone.
Well,
You
and
just
get back to
do.
the us versus them. What is offense more other than just a feeling of disgust?
Mm,
And it's the number one player in us versus them. They're the dirty this. They're the we put terms on it, and being Texan, you can think of all the derogatory terms that are made for people that come over from Mexico, uh, or even something that is kind of a positive becomes a disgusting term like redneck. Redneck means you work hard all day in the sun. It doesn't mean anything else, but yet people associate it with dirty and nasty and
hmm Yeah, and that's where the difference between people who take the moniker on themselves as a badge of honor, they separate it from what the yuppie coastal elites would call redneck. They merge redneck and white trash. We separate them.
mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Um, kind of like, so something that you don't get. I don't know, maybe along the Southwest, maybe like in Arizona, it's similar, or in Southern California, but the derogatory terms that we have for Mexican immigrants, one in particular that begins with a W,
Mm-hmm.
um, you will hear Hispanics say those words if they are, especially if they're generational Hispanics, if they're multi-generation Texicans, they'll say those too because they're part of the us. It isn't a racial thing. It's a it's more of an ethno-geographic thing.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still you.
Well, and there's also the
However,
the
you
we
make
did
those
this the right
lines.
way thing.
Yes, but to your point that uh, there's always going to be an us and them, and sometimes it gets complicated.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy to draw the lines on, stark skin color differences, but uh, there's a people difference there. There's a people component there. To that point,
Well,
we've
no,
skipped
I want to
over.
make a social commentary on who is doing this Jato thing and how it's relevant today. And it is offensive. These are the privileged white girls, the awfuls, the affluent white female liberals. And oh my goodness, they get it wrong. And if we could, if the people who they are trying to like in real life pander to would actually get offended like Rourke did, this shit would end. But I'm with Rourke on this because I see how it works in real life. These are the awfuls.
Well, it starts off as the awfuls, but it doesn't. I mean, and we do get some perspectives from them later, or not perspectives, but we at least see them more directly. We see interaction with them, and not just the here where we're introduced to them, where we're just looking down on them and talking about them secondhand. And they're morons. Yeah, they're pretty dorky. That they really are silly, but they're not allowed to turn into what our awfuls are
Because real
they
life.
because real life
Yeah.
slaps them in the face hard.
Because there's
They
actual swords at some point. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
They start off as these privileged, affluent people. That's why they are able to come here and practice the sword in a palace and have servants bring them something to drink and something to wipe the sweat from their face when they break, because they they have the money and the position to be able to do that. But at some point it gets real, and then they're going to have to deal with reality. The problem we have today is it's very, very easy to avoid reality because we
Hmm.
have so much comfort and so much affluence. Um, and you don't have you don't have that in this world. Um, but and that's where Rourke's right and he's wrong. Is that, to Rand's point, maybe they'll learn enough, but also, what's unspoken there because they live it, they don't have to say it, is, at some point reality is going to slap them in the face.
Hmm.
And and also, you know, he he thinks this a number of times, and a number of people talk about that. This is there's no sitting on the sidelines here. This is, the last battle is coming, and it's going to affect everyone, so everyone has to do something. There is no sitting on the sidelines for this one. So there's also an element of that is, look, we need all the training we can get as fast as we can get it because we don't know how much time we have. Um, but I was going to get we'd kind of skipped over Boobies McGee here. Um, and she is both annoying and a great side character. Um, and it's
I
it's
think
also
at this point she's still great. It's when we get to
yeah.
it's the annoying story she ends up in later. That's uh,
Yeah,
I
she
don't
doesn't
take
have a
it from
very
her.
satisfying end.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's the story that she ends up
It's
in.
it's it's not a very satisfying conclusion. But I like to your point about blind spots and us and them, and it's amusing to me that this is a point where Barrelane stands up to Rourke because she does have very much a father-daughter relationship with him. It's also funny when Jordan never tells us exactly what happened, but you get a strong hint that basically Rourke treated her like a unruly child that had never been punished
Hmm.
corporally, and so he did, to set her straight. So
Don't
there's a
make that
little.
implication because then he'd get the parent treatment because you know, we actually were told that he did the thing he did.
So uh, there's a touch of fear there. There's respect and fear, which is as it should be, but that's problematic now, I guess. Um, but this is something where she's going to put her foot down. She's going to stand her ground because this is something that's important to her. That um deaths are down, that by doing this, they're not just, getting into bar fights and stabbing each other. It's more ordered. But also I stood up for the women, especially. I stood up for these girls because I'm one of them. That's what's unsaid here is she is a very young woman who is in charge of a small nation and has, since she was a teenager, and she's not much past that here. I think the implication is she's like mid late 20s, that she has had to uh use her femininity to fend off sleazy guys in positions
Hmm.
of power her whole life. And she stood up to these parents who said, "You send these girls home." And she identifies with them. She sympathizes and empathizes with them because she's one of them, even if she's not going to, she thinks the idea of her taking up a sword is silly. No, she has people for that. But because this is what they want to do and this is their way of standing up for themselves, she's going to stand up for them. And I kind of feel like Barrelane standing up for them has more impact on Rourke than Rand standing up for them
Hmm.
because of that relationship there.
I'm trying to look in
Okay.
here with the talk of Shara if there's any clues about stuff, but
Yes.
it's the
Yeah.
benefit of the reread versus the initial read.
Mm-hmm.
Because now you see a certain thing and you're like, oh, this is that thing that annoyed
Is it?
me, and I want to make sure I didn't
Yeah.
miss something.
Is this a teeny tiny nugget that he hid in here that I completely skipped over previously?
Which it is, but I still don't see it that it being enough, even in hindsight, that it's enough to let you know uh what things are coming.
Yeah. Uh, we do get a brief mention here of people that will show up later, which is nice when he sets those up. Uh, Caroline Damodred and Torm Riatan.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And she
uh,
becomes an intriguing character. Of
mhm.
all the people you get thrust into, she's one of the ones that kind of sticks out as someone that's all right.
I meant to put a pin in this and try and remember, but I need to go back and look. I'm pretty sure Torum Riatan was one of the guys that Matt thumped uh when he went into the stone. And that he
No,
was
that was Darlin.
Darlin.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. Who comes across as uh you know a super arrogant douchey high lord and then becomes a very interesting kind of different person down
Hmm.
the road. Yeah, okay, that was Darlin. Torum is Caroline's cousin, I think. He's Carheenan, isn't he?
Yeah, he is. Yeah.
Oh, there he is. Yeah, I knew it mentioned him here. Uh uh that Darlin's rebellion in Tyr. Uh yeah, so he was mentioned there. Anyway, um
Because Jylen is the one that says you just did this to this person, and it was Darlin. That was the first High Lord that Matt took out in that
mhm.
exchange, which apparently there were more, but that was the one that Jordan put in there to say you did this to this person, and he used Jylen as the vessel to deliver the news.
All right, did you have any thoughts on Shara or was it
No, it's just it's a little nugget, and I'm like, we have to talk about that in spoilers,
okay.
because I can't say why it's a nugget. So,
Oh, yeah, and then and then the amusing banter with Bearland and Rourke ends on a somber note because we can't have nice things.
wait, what was that
Um
again?
Mangan. Uh
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. This so
yeah.
yeah. I was trying to remember if this had happened already, and no, this is where it happens. And
Yeah, this is where it happens, and Rand is mad that they didn't deal with it, but he understands. I mean, we get from his perspective that he knows he's kind of being selfish and petulant here. He's the one in charge. And this is a freaking clan chief. So there there's no one above him except Rand. He's the one that kind of has to deal with this because it's the freaking clan chief. Um, but he doesn't want to because he likes Mangan. And as he's thinking that he was one of the first ones to come and support him with with no strings attached, with no waiting around to see how things unfold. And here he is sending him to the gallows. Uh, but you do get some dark humor in it, which helps to kind of diffuse things of Bearlane in a tizzy of I'm not used to people coming to me and confessing that they had just committed murder. Uh, but he's Aiel, and that's what they do.
mm-hmm,
So, all right, I did this thing. I
mm-hmm.
have toe. I have so. What's the punishment? What's the price? I did this thing because it needed to be done. In my eyes, it needed to be done, but now there's a price to pay, and I'm going to pay it, even if paying it means I walk myself up to the gallows.
But then he's also trying to detach himself from it too. Don't bring this to me. You know, I want these bad things about my ruling to be detached from myself, because then
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to think about them. You know, it's like we eat our ground beef and we don't have to kill the cow, you know. It's a tough position to be in for a little farm boy.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, we're barely about 2 years out.
That's a good point. All right. And then we get to the school.
I love the
This
school. The school, well, because this I love the school because it starts the storyline that Min comes in and actually becomes the cool character that she is too. So part of it is because I was an academic and I love to study and I love philosophy and all of those things, but it also brings one of the more interesting story arcs that comes in the later books. As the books go on, the story arcs kind of get lamer and lamer, except for certain exceptions. And the Min arc is the exception
well,
to that.
the especially the newer story arcs.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think the Rand's stays interesting, stays good, except that he starts to get annoying
Mm-hmm.
as he starts to go down his dark spiral. But it's the newer stuff that he introduces that makes you go, what are we doing here, man? Come on, just let's get to the good stuff.
Well, in Jordan's defense on the Rand story arc, is he has an idea that's a good rise, fall, redemption
Hmm.
kind of thing, but it has to draw out because
Yeah,
there's so many other arcs he's fitting into 14 books. You know, I think originally it was supposed to be 15. And
yeah,
so he's got so many other things going on that he has to draw the Rand arc out, which because it starts from the beginning and ends at the end. And the annoying part of it is that you're supposed to be annoyed with him at times. Rise, fall, redemption. You have to spend so long in the fall that
yeah. That's a good point. And I'd be curious if anyone's been nerdy enough to kind of break down the storylines by time spent on them. Because I'm wondering, does it feel like Rand's story gets dragged out, or is it simply that we start seeing so many other things that it takes a long time to read through it, but time wise, page wise, it's not that much. It just feels like it.
well, Rand is beginning to end. Perrin hits you early, and realistically, he gets annoying too later on because it's like the good stuff happens and then it gets to drag on. And Matt
Mhm.
starts a little late, and then it gets good, and then Sanderson takes over, and then it gets bad, and then it gets a little better. But at the same time, the earliness and the lateness kind of make theirs a little bit more impactful, where Rand has to be spread out over all
Yeah.
this time, and it encompasses so many different things because he's the emperor. He's the everyman, where Perrin has his role and Matt has his role, and all these other characters have their role. And Rand actually becomes more interesting through the role players in his life, such as Min.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
And
Oh,
Elaine,
show.
Elaine should be too, but I just don't like the way it was written when
Yeah.
she
And
comes, because she's kind of a side piece right now with the yeah, giggity, with the Nynaeve story. She's part of the Nynaeve story at this point.
yes,
But when she gets her own story arc,
that's when it falls off for me. Yeah.
maybe it's just kind of the interest in the character itself or whatever, but it just didn't go as well. But it is the interesting part of Rand at that point, because Rand becomes interesting by his extensions, the people that are part of his life that are going to ultimately help him along the way.
Hmm.
Whereas the character himself, it really just drags out. I mean, that's a lot of pages of a character to just keep dragging out.
Yep. 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 Um, so the interesting thing to me, the reason I like this school is from the historical perspective, because you like I imagine you like the philosophical, especially the what's his name.
Harred Fel.
But
Yeah.
I like seeing all the inventions, seeing all the different things, and trying to um speculate on what exactly he's describing, and then seeing what's coming, seeing the turn of the age that he's showing you the, you know, the beta version of the Industrial Revolution.
Hmm.
That is, these are the seeds that are being planted in order so that when we get to the next age, when this warfare is over and we have some peace, then we have time to focus on these things, and then this is where this will all flourish. So that the fourth age is going to be kind of steampunky because we're still going to have magic. Um, so I like that. I also like that his little comment right at the beginning of how many spies do you have in the Sun Palace? So even this, what is basically the dean of a college, is playing the game because
Hmm.
Karhinen gonna Karhinen. But I'm not sure how much we could talk about Fell without getting spoilery, because I mean that's all he is. I mean, sometimes you get into some interesting philosophical stuff with what
Hmm.
he's talking about, but I mean, why Rand goes to him is Rand is trying to, you've got this kind of eccentric genius here, and he's trying to use him to help figure out, you know, what these prophecies. Let's piece together all of these different things we have with prophecies and foretellings, and then just our own, intuition and supposition, and can we figure out what they actually mean, tangibly, literally, to help give me some kind of a guide to what I'm doing here.
And I'm trying to think because not Rand, Jordan parallels so many people into his books. Harred Fell is so many different people when you look at the great philosophers, but he really is. I would say he's kind of like a slightly more modern Plato.
Hmm.
Realistically, he's so outside of the box that you get it is closer to the ancient Greek philosophers, the Socrates, the Aristotles,
Hmm.
but Plato was the one that was really he was the less nature, more philosophical human nature version of all those. So I don't know. I have to really dig into this part of it again, just to because is he just a blend of them all, or is he specifically supposed to be like somebody? Now, we really would have liked with the school a more Da Vinci like character as well. That would have been fun. But
Hmm. Yeah, and we kind of see that there are some of those, like there are several Da Vincis, but we never
mhm.
spend time on them. You just kind of get it from their what is implied of their inventions.
Yeah,
Um,
and here's a scene right here that Disney and Hollywood could take a note from, because we had diversity and inclusion in one scene here with all of these new things happening, and it was done right. There you go.
mhm. Um, my favorite part about Fell is he just doesn't seem to understand or remember or whatever that he's talking to the dragon. That he he just sees a young lad who, as he says on the bottom of 415, I don't see, Rand trailed off. Yes, you do. You'd make a good student. He's kind of busy, man. He's kind of got stuff to do. Um, but this is the scene where Fel is telling him that the last battle isn't really the last battle, and it depresses him. And yet he kind of already knew this to an extent, because Ishi had been talking about we've been fighting this fight since the beginning of time.
Mm-hmm.
And yet he takes it as depressing because he doesn't have that anchor to help balance him of he, he can't see the he can't see the half full. He can only see the half empty. or I don't know if you've seen the meme that you know, the optimist, it's half full, the pessimist, it's half empty. 2022, it's P. It's P, isn't it? Because that's the world we live in now.
No, I
But
usually have the meme that it's all the way full because air has matter.
yeah. So so
But
yeah,
you know what?
he
Now that
needs
I'm
that
thinking about it, you brought
person.
up Ishii. Ishii is like our Nietzsche, and the counter to Nietzsche is a Saint Thomas Aquinas, and Fel is a very positive version of Ishii. Fel is the Ishii that didn't go down the dark
Well,
path.
that's interesting. It makes me wonder if there was a if that was in his head, because that's kind of what he's talking about here with the circle. And that was kind of Aquinas's idea of cause and effect going backwards. Um Kind of the same idea. But anyway, Rand doesn't have that anchor until Min comes in, which is why I want to hurry along, but I keep getting sidetracked here. Because she's great when she comes in here, because she's the one who's going to do that for him. That hold on though, Rand, you're getting depressed because all you're seeing is that I'm doing this for nothing. Well, hold on, no. The upside to that though is that it means life goes on.
Mm-hmm.
It means that yes, we have to go through this terrible thing now, but life is going to go on. And you just saw all that in there, that not only is life going to go on, but it's going to get better. If half of these things pay off and do what the inventors think or say they're going to do, life is not only going to go on, but it's going to improve.
Mm-hmm.
But he's so hung up on the negative that he can't let himself see that. And I think I accidentally said something there uh painfully true. Is he feels like that is actually an element that you get from his POVs, is that he feels like he can't let himself see the positive because that's going to make him weak,
Mm-hmm.
because that's going to distract him from this very, very important thing that he has to do. No, the positive is what is going to help you do the important thing that you have to do.
Mm-hmm. And that's analogous to everything in life. You get up and do the hard thing because the other option is death. You you get up and go to work because if you don't work, you don't make money, you don't eat, and you die. And it doesn't matter what time you're in. That's just the circle of life. You kill the cow so you can have beef, so you can eat, so you can live, and then you do it again over and over and over and over again. It doesn't mean the
Mm-hmm.
events are pleasant, but it means you go on.
And he should know that as a shepherd.
Mm-hmm.
He's
Well,
literally seen that.
and that's the thing that he's been disconnected from ever since he became the emperor, though. Someone to just ground him in real life. People are saying you need to send people to war and have battles like Moraine because it's for the greater good. But no, okay, let me put a note because this is spoilers. Hold on. Someone does that here coming up to some degree. Okay. How far do you want to go before we get to spoilers?
Well, I'm trying to get through Rand's stuff here. Um, which I think we can zip along in a second. Yeah. Um, all right. So we got a little bit of Egwene here, which I think is we can go over pretty quick, but I do think it's useful. Mostly two things. Uh, well, one, did we skip over her naughty dream? The last time we skipped Egwene's part because she's blushing here because she's thinking about Gawain, and that's when Cerelia finds her
We didn't
and
talk about it,
does
but
her
we talked about
Cerelianess.
what she was doing at the time, which was what
because
she
we were
wasn't
more,
supposed to be doing.
yeah, we were more talking about what her doing what she wasn't supposed to be doing.
Hmm.
Um, but where is it? Where Cerelia says, yeah, so 419. When a young woman's cheeks redden for no apparent reason, Cerelia said, there is usually a man involved. What man has attracted your interest? Can we expect to see you lay a bridal wreath at his feet soon? But so what I love though is Egwene doing her Egwene thing of Aes Sedai seldom marry, Egwene told her coolly. And surely I ain't got no time for your nonsense, girl. she just she just keeps on going. Those hips were made for babies, and you will have them. And then she takes her to Rand's chambers, and all the while listing off guys, trying to figure out who has attracted her attention. Um, she also did her best to list each man's charms, and since this included describing what he looked like without clothes, Isle men and women shared the same sweat tints, she certainly got enough blushes. Uh, all right, but then I think that's where Cerelia is not only a fun character but an important character because she's so freaking old that she don't take no shit from nobody. You
Hmm.
know, Egwene's gonna put on airs. She's not. She's just gonna ignore it. She doesn't have time for that. Even you know, even Amos, who is older because she's been channeling for a while, but far younger than Cerelia. And even though Amos stands very high with the wise women, when Cerelia has something to say, she gonna say it.
Hmm.
Um, and that's that to the Egwene bashing. That's where she's important for Rand and for the others around him, and where Egwene doesn't necessarily seem to learn those lessons, or at least apply them. That she should be learning from Cerelia. Um, that all right. Um, and then they immediately, when he comes in, immediately start sparring.
Hmm.
Um, so 422. Uh, Rand, you have to help me with the wise ones. They'll listen to you. She burst out before she could stop herself. That was not what she'd intended to say. It is good to see you again, too, he said, smiling. Uh, I am well, thank you, Egwene. And you? You look to be yourself again, full of ginger as ever. Um, I do think their uh confrontational relationship is interesting, especially when we see from the mirror worlds and even from Egwene's own kind of mirror world journey in her testing that had they stayed in the Two Rivers, they end up married and having children. But so they can live together, they can work together, they can be civil with each other, and yet they leave the Two Rivers and they immediately become opposed. They always feel like they're opposed to each other. And when Nynaeve or Perrin or Matt are disagreeing with them, it's different. There's not an opposition there. It's just a disagreement.
Hmm.
Um,
Well, I think that's one of the overall things he was trying to bring together with their two stories, and to not get too spoilery, but she is the yin and he is the yang. And I don't it may have been a Sanderson thing, or it may have, but it tried to bring it back together where the symbol was whole.
mhm.
but at the same time, I think the delivery was a little off at the end. But
Yeah, that's a bit of a spoilery thing there, but I do have
yeah,
a
yeah,
thought
yeah,
on that.
yeah.
But then when she leaves, she does think he thinks about how much she has changed. Um, but whatever clothes she wore, she wanted to be Aes Sedai, and she would keep Aes Sedai's secrets even after he made it clear that he needed Elaine to ensure peace in two nations. He had to think of her as Aes Sedai. It was saddening. Well, yes, but in her defense, you have to think of yourself as the Dragon Reborn, and that's how you're acting.
Mhm.
You know, yes, you're right at the beginning of, yeah, hi, Egwene, I'm doing well. Thank you for asking when, you didn't. So obvious point there. Uh, but then he goes into Dragon Reborn mode. So in her defense, you kind of have to expect that she's going to go into Aes Sedai mode. So neither one of you seem capable of dropping the title. Coming to your analogy earlier, neither one of you seem capable of coming out of CEO mode
Mhm.
around each other. And if you would, then maybe you wouldn't have such a confrontational relationship. Or as he thinks there at the end of these couple of paragraphs, at least you didn't let her see you were tired, he told his reflection. That had been one of Moraine's more succinct bits of advice. Never let them see you weaken. Except
Except from her point of view, she sees how tired he is.
yes, exactly. But also, she shouldn't be one of the them.
Hmm.
Uh, but that's the place he's kind of backed himself into that corner, and in his defense, she kind of pushes him into that corner. Um, and then we get a bit of Sulin and the maidens trying to keep an eye on him without looking like they're keeping an eye on him because he only wants two people guarding him while he's in the palaces. Um, Whatever the Karakarn wanted, nothing must happen to the only son of a maiden ever to come back to them. Uh, which I don't think I hadn't really thought about it in these terms until we started talking about Rand and his lack of feminine influence, but that's on their side too. That's why they're acting this way, and they kind of can't see it from his point of view, and he kind of can't see it from their point of view, is he doesn't understand why he is so important to them. Because you have all of these, hundreds, thousands of women who have, especially Sulin, who is old enough to have gray hair, um, old enough to be his mother, but they have all put off their maternal instincts to do this thing that they think is a higher duty, which is to be warriors to protect their clan and sept, to fight for their clan and sept. And so to them, he is all of their surrogate sons, even though, he thinks about a lot of them treat him like a younger brother or a nephew. But a lot of them are try to mother him. There's a big effing reason for that
Hmm.
because all of them have this maternal instinct, even if they have put it secondary to something else. It's still there. And that's why he's so important to them, especially to someone like Sulin, who is old enough to probably be a grandmother, especially, in the time frames of a setting like this where you have children younger. Um, and old enough to have possibly have known his mother. I don't know if it ever says that she did because I can't remember, what clan and sept she came from. Uh, no, I think Sulin. Janduin wasn't from Rourke's clan, was he? He was a different clan.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Fact check us on that, Scott.
But anyway, she's old enough to have possibly been around Shail, been around his mother, uh, and thus been a spear sister of her. So in she could he could very well be a nephew because in their culture, in their way of thinking, uh, and Lan even points this out when Rand finds out that he is adopted, that Tam is not his biological father, that there's the same idea there because you live in such a harsh place. If you adopt a child, that's your child. That's not an adopted child. That's not your, that's not your adopted father. That's your father. That's your
Mhm.
son. That's your daughter. So, and that is very strong in their way of thinking too, that if we become first sisters, then we are sisters. We have that relationship. We have that bond. Um, and so him coming back to them would be a big effing deal. Um, so the opening of 19, I don't know if we want to go down that rabbit hole. The interesting thing about that is that his dream is Lews Theron's dream.
Mm.
That he has a dream that is all Lews Theron because it's all Age of Legends imagery. Um, and he's terrified about it or distressed by it, maybe not terrified, distressed by it when it should help him square the circle
Mhm.
because he's unconscious. That he sees it as, I lose my consciousness and Lews Theron takes over. No, it's you should see it as this is the true you. This is the merging that these are also your memories. So I where did I hear this from? Oh, it was our wait, who did you have for Spanish? You didn't have Rios, did you?
I had both. I had Rios and
Okay.
Flores.
But she talked about how because Spanish was her second language, that she had been told, and she said she experienced this, that when she truly became fluent, she knew when she had truly become fluent when she started dreaming in Spanish.
Hmm.
Um, because then it has become ingrained in you. Same idea here is that you are now fluent in Lews Theron because it's part of you. Um, but he can't see that, and he doesn't have anyone to help him see that. Um, okay. I don't know that there's much I want to say about this unless you have thoughts. Um,
Which part?
just this chapter, Matters of Toes.
No, no.
Okay. So skipping along. Okay. So the last couple of chapters here, um, some Ogier show up,
Hmm.
which is fun because we finally get to meet Loyal's mother after hearing about her. We get to see her finally. Um, so Coville and Elder Heyman, who we have also heard a good deal about, and then oh, Aerith. Yeah, I was trying to remember her name, who we've actually seen before.
Hmm.
Um, I really like this scene. Um, it's hard not to be conspiratorial with Jordan because so many things are connected, but I kind of feel like it's not an accident that he had the Lews Theron dream scene right before this scene. So the opening of the very next chapter is the Ogier, because um the interesting thing to me is kind of like I said, the cool thing to me about the school is the historical part of it, the seeing how things are going to develop. And it's the same idea going backwards that I really identify with the Ogier here, that Elder Heyman is literally crying as he's marking these maps,
Mm-hmm.
thinking about how much has been lost. Um, and uh and how the humans don't get it. They don't understand because they should be in Yogir's minds, they should be the ones crying because this is their history of not remembering these old names, and they don't. I don't know what's that. They don't have that connection there, because of how much has been lost over the years, but especially between the two, major catastrophes since the breaking, the Trolloc Wars, where stuff was, burned and pillaged, and then the Hundred Years' War, where stuff was burned and pillaged again. But the Ogier have been able to keep themselves apart,
Mm-hmm.
so they do remember. Um,
Living longer helps.
well, not just the living longer, but then having a contiguous civilization
Mm-hmm.
that the these human wars didn't touch the Ogier, so even though their records are oral as much as they are written, because they do write, they do have books and tomes that they talk about, but uh they're they're able to keep those traditions alive. They're able to keep that history alive because there's not an interruption there. Um, you know, so one of the examples I think of is the library at Alexandria. We have references to so many books and tomes and histories and things that were there in the library that are like third-hand accounts because it was all lost when the library was destroyed. And so we just have the vaguest ideas of what was in there. Um, but we know from accounts that it was freaking huge. And that's just one example.
Mm-hmm.
And there were who knows how many libraries of Alexandria throughout the world, throughout history, um, that became lost, which is you know part of Jordan's whole idea with this world, with this universe that he has created, of the circle, the wheel, which, yeah, it keeps things cyclical, but it also kind of grinds things down like a grist mill. That there's a, another wheel that you can think of, that it has kind of ground things down, and it has changed things so much as the wheel turns. And we get that at the very beginning with the allusions to, possible things of our history, uh when they're asking Tom for these stories at the very beginning, uh in the Two Rivers, even before the Trollocs come. And you have allusions to possibly, Queen Elizabeth, or the Cold War with uh uh Moscow and the US squaring off against each other, or I think one of them that people postulated that it was a reference to uh the moon landings or the space
Mm-hmm.
program.
Yeah,
There was
Glenn.
some
Yeah,
Glenn, yeah.
yeah.
So you have all that is just the barest glimmer of what the actual history was or could have been. Okay. And then things get dark,
Oh, as they
um,
should.
as they should. So So he wants to go take care of it because he's kind of the only one who can.
Mm-hmm.
But we get more of the maiden thing here of that you were talking about, that he's about to go on his own, which pisses them off. Um, because he doesn't understand. It doesn't matter that so where is it? 455. So 455 down. Sulin comes in, and Sulin's glance at the gateway was barely short of accusing. I can protect myself better there than you can, Rand told her coldly. He did not intend to be cold, but wrapped in the void, he could not make his voice anything but cold and distant. There is nothing your spears can fight, and some things they can't. Sulin still wore a good deal of her earlier stiffness. All the more reason for us to be there. I mean, they're both right, and he can't see that.
Mm-hmm.
That, yeah, you're this is something you can't fight. But to Sulin's point, okay, then you need someone. It's the whole reason that I have warders, because while you're busy looking at the thing that we can't fight, you need someone to watch out for things that are unexpected. Watch out for things that we can fight. And just the simple fact of, no, we need to make sure you're okay. We call me when you get there. There's a reason we say that.
Well, and it's the whole idea of known unknowns. Yeah,
Yep.
you don't know everything. You may know the thing that we can't fight, but you don't know everything that's there.
Um, I think the way this chapter ends always depresses me, because I mean there's kind of a double depression here, that he kind of goes nuts looking for Leah when they can't find her. And is so much so that he's not paying attention to the time, when he's the one who knows more than anyone that you do not want to be here after dark. So we have got to leave. You're going to your desperation to not lose another maiden is potentially going to get all of you worse than killed.
Mm-hmm.
So uh 464. Whatever watches us is waiting for nightfall, I think, Sulin said. I have looked into windows where something was looking back at me, but there was nothing there. Dancing the spears with something we cannot see will not be easy. Well, I love the matter of factness of, but we're still gonna try.
Yep.
Um, and then when he takes them to the two rivers, then you get another kind of note of sadness there of uh all right, so 465 at the very bottom there. Um, for a moment, Rand wondered whether he was really in the Two Rivers at all. No, the feel of the place told him he was. The smell of the air shouted home. All those changes Bode and the rest of the girls had told him about, they had not really sunk in. Nothing ever really changed in the Two Rivers. And so he's home, but he's not home, but he's home, but he can't stay. But as he says, the smell of the air shouted home. He should fricking go home. You're home. Go see your dad. But
Mm-hmm.
he can't, because he won't let himself, because he's convinced himself that the only way to protect the people close to him is to push the people close to him away, which is exactly what's going on with the maidens here. Is, no, you're actually hurting them more, because you're going to go into danger no matter what, and they have pledged themselves to danger, and so you protecting them is actually hurting them more, because you are, I mean, that you get the little blurb there with Sulin at the end of the previous chapter where she's, you know, ostensibly just twiddling her thumbs, but in actuality, she's trying to stay close to Rand to keep an eye on him because that's what you're putting them through. You're putting them through unnecessary worry because they said, call me when you get there, and you didn't because you figured it's not that important. No, it is. It's it's really freaking important because the worry of the unknown is what makes it so much worse. All right, so let's pause here for a second, and then we will jump into the spoilery bits. Okay. All right, so as usual, if you are rereading with us, this is we're going to get into some spoilery thoughts. So if this is your first read, go away because it's too good to be spoiled.
All right. The first note I had was the Shara stuff.
Yes, yeah, that was the first thought. Uh,
Because if you've read through all of it, you know that's where Demandred is, and that's what he's doing.
mhm.
And what I'm trying to see as we go through is if there were actual clues that you could follow
Yeah,
that, because or if it was M. Night Shyamalan type thing, you know?
and that's what we were speculating on with the that you don't really get, until you're rereading after reading the whole series is was Grendel trying to point Samuel at Demandred? Because I assume so, that's why she had that little scene there where she had the little Sharan people and they were, kind of doing the I know that you know that I know that you know that I know that you know and having their little battle of wits. So I think that was supposed to be a tiny little clue of where Demandred was. But I don't know how you're supposed to see that until unless you're super autistic or you've read the whole series.
Yeah, and specific to what we just went through, you got that clue, and then you get the one we just read, which is that this is Demandred basically taking power. This is the
Yeah.
war within. This is the civil war where
Yeah.
he took control of the whole area. So, but it's still, if Jordan was trying to give you hints, he gave you the
Well,
weakest hints. That
I actually think what it's supposed to be, uh, or the conclusion he expects you to draw, uh, not getting the big reveal to come at the end that it's Demandred, is that I assume that what you're supposed to get is that these rumors Rourke is talking about are the result of, connect those back to Grendel. It's the result of Grendel kidnapping their two leaders for her little pets, her little petting zoo.
yeah, that makes more sense. It that was my big beef, and again, we this is one of those things we have to put in the category of, did Sanderson just flub it,
Mm-hmm.
or was Jordan's setup not the proper setup for what we needed? Uh,
Yeah. Now there were some back in the day on the forums. There were some pretty good long form theories laid out that said he was in Shara, but they were all negative. It was all he's in Shara because by process of elimination he can't be anywhere else.
yeah,
You know,
except
but
for the tame theory.
but 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 proving a negative is really hard.
Yeah, well, it's like it's the opposite of good science.
Exactly.
Yeah. The other note I had was Tam does that. What were we talking about? Taking Rand through the process of this is life.
Yes.
It wasn't the grandiose, well, you have to send people off to battle for this. It's like, well, we do these kind of things every day.
Are you talking about their sparring match at the very end?
Yeah, well,
He's
just
reminding him.
reintroducing him into his
Yes.
life. Yeah.
He's teaching him lessons he's already taught him, but Rand hasn't connected those lessons to what's happening here.
Mm-hmm.
That, to your point that you like to make is telling your grandpa what I do in my gym is what you do on the farm every day, but people don't do that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It's there, there's a reason why kind of the agrarian life is idealized because there's a lot of lessons to be drawn physically and mentally and emotionally and psychologically from, you know, the struggle to uh grow your own food, to take care of other living things on a large scale, and all of the things that go along with that. So he's learned these lessons, but he's not connecting those lessons. He's not making the jump for the jump to, applying those lessons to real life.
Well, it's where a father comes in, because usually where a father comes in is delayed gratification. You have to give this up now for the end result later. And what we were specifically talking about was Rand is so in the moment on who died for me, and all these people died in this moment just to have something happen later. Well, the later thing is the most important thing. And so Rand can't get out of that in his own head.
I don't know why I thought. Oh, I know I thought of this because I keep meaning to go back to watching Cobra Kai. I hadn't thought about it in these terms, but that's what Mr. Miyagi is.
Mhm.
I think there's a reason that Daniel's son uh is a single parent child, and that's what he's doing with the wax on, wax off. Is and then the kid gets angry. This is stupid. This is pointless. You're not teaching me anything. And then the father figure says, "Yes, I am. Here, look. This is what this means."
And that's what Luke Skywalker did for Rey. Oh, never mind.
Oh,
Oh,
why would you do that to me?
did I ruin it?
It's bad enough that we have the stupid direct comparison between Wheel of Time and Wheel of Time, in quotes, because it's not. You don't have to go dragging other crap into it. Although I guess I did that with the stupid Rings of Power. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
All right. What else have we got?
Oh, the yin and yang with Egwene and Rand. They've been set up from the beginning to have this conflict, and the conflict is the problem. Because
Yeah.
if we rewind 1,000 years, that was the conflict between Lews Therin and the Emerald Seat, who didn't support him.
Hmm.
And this is the direction Egwene. The complaint we've talked about with Egwene is she pushed her way into the tower revolutionarily, but didn't change the tower at all. And
Yeah.
that's the problem, because the tower was the extreme in one direction. And Egwene is the extreme in one direction. She is woman, hear me roar. She is going to manipulate and get her way and do the things she needs to do to be successful under the radar while still maintaining a social image. Whereas Rand is, man, hear me roar. I am going to control things. I am going to put things in their place, and I'm going to have this work out for the greater good. That was Lews Therin and the Emerald back then. So if we want to put Reborns on there, Egwene is the manifestation of the old Emerald Seat. And as long as those things were fighting, remember, the reason the bore wasn't sealed properly was because we had just men.
Yeah, and I seem to recall there is a very brief scene or an intimation. Maybe it's maybe Scott remembers that. Maybe it comes from Rand's POV where he's in Lews Therin mode, but that it wasn't just that, you know, that scene from the show where it's them talking and then the Amarillion tells them no, that this is a reckless plan. We're not going to do this. I'm pretty sure it's either said or intimated at one point that she went to scheming. She went to when Lews Therin came to her with the plan, she got with her the other women and said, you know, somewhat conspiratorially, we all need to agree that we are not going to help with this. That don't let him do this, which is exactly what Egwene does then at the end of the series.
And this is where language gets in the way, because we talk about chaos and order and men versus women and all of these things. I'm going to kind of throw that on its face using an example. OCD is not order. OCD is neurotic. And women on the spectrum, overlapping bell curves, all those disclaimers, women on the spectrum are more neurotic because they're constantly looking at what can go wrong, not that they're conscientious and want to create an ordered structure. They're the rule makers in the sense that they're trying to prevent bad. Whereas men are the rule makers because of greater good. And that's the disconnect here. Rand is in one specific direction because man, and Egwene is the essence of woman here, which is why Nynaeve comes out so great as a character, because she is woman who was raised by man who is trying to overcome the things that are holding her back because of that upbringing, but at the same time trying not to go down the route of neuroticism that gets in the way. So yeah, OCD is not order. OCD is neurotic, because if I don't do this exactly this way, everything is going to go wrong.
A thought I had when you were talking about Egwene was that uh she she even knows this because she is she is installed in large part because of her connection to Rand. But then rather than using that connection and saying, yeah, I'm the one who can help deal with the dragon because I grew up with him. I was quasi betrothed to him, but I'm going to do it in my way. She ends up, at least the way it comes across, she ends up resenting that to the extent where she's acting as Amarillan as any other Amarillan would.
Mm-hmm.
And when it actually comes to their confrontation, when he comes down from Dragon Mount after his, self-actualization, it really comes across there. And again, to your point, how much of this is how it had to be written with not being Jordan, and how much of it is, not good setup or whatever, but it doesn't really come across to me that Egwene is the one who softens there, that it's because Egwene is the Emeryllian that confrontation goes off as well as it does. It's more that because of what Rand had just gone through, because he has so fully embraced his Tavernness, that he is overawing her, that she kind of can't do anything else,
Mm-hmm.
because of who he is in that moment.
Which is where I would love to be in a room where Sanderson was so comfortable he could talk about anything, because we're also getting to the point where wokeness is starting to take control. And you can see Sanderson is more along that he slides in that direction a little bit more than Jordan ever would have.
Yeah.
And I wonder if the end of the book coinciding with the time frame that it came out may have influenced some of the results.
I don't know how well.
Because we both watched The Critical Drinker, and you look at his complaints about modern movies. There was a slide in that direction going to the end, especially with the Matt story. It was all about the woohoo moments and no longer developing characters, but that it was just Tuan was this and Matt was this, and this great thing happened. And I think I wonder if Sanderson's kind of like our friend that starts with a J,
Mhm.
that married a wokey person and changed completely. He was a very free thinker and everything up until that point. And I think Sanderson is he reminds me of that. And I wonder if that had any influence on the ending of the story, where I can't change it too much because Wheel of Time people will hang me, but also I have to do this because this
Well,
is
I think more likely it's that his personality um leans in that direction anyway.
mhm.
And so that was just his subconscious, his personality coming through. He doesn't strike me as the kind of person who would do the wokeness intentionally. in that in the way that it is being done now, which is we're not telling a story, we're pushing a message. It's just this is kind of who he is,
Mhm.
and you see that. But I don't know how much of it is wokeness and how much of it is when he talks now. He has to be political to protect himself and protect himself within the creative industry. So he can't just come out and badmouth the series. He has to tiptoe around where he thinks there were problems and where they did things wrong rather than just saying, holy crap, they butchered this whole thing.
So I recently, about a month ago, finished read 1984, and Egwene is very much, and I'm blanking on the name, the girl from the second part of the book.
Mm-hmm.
She that's her, and realistically, there's a lot of back. I mean, obviously, Jordan probably read that because it's a classic, but it's she very much is that girl, which is the definition. And I think our innate kind of like blah towards Egwene is because she's an awful. She really is. She's that affluent, white, rich female that just plays the social part, but underneath it has her real beliefs. And it's and she climbs the ladder that way. She's a Robin DiAngelo in a lot of ways.
You know, I'm gonna briefly mention this and kind of put a pin in it. And it'll be a long time before we get there, but when I said I think Egwene has the best arc, not the most likable, the most enjoyable favorite, but best just kind of technically, it occurs to me as we've been talking about this. I don't know that it's that. I think actually what it is that she has the best climax. Giggity. And to your point about how would it have been if if Jordan been able to finish things, the 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 peak of her arc comes in the last book he wrote because her you know her big moment to shine and where I and what made me think of this and when I said this it was because I was in the middle of reading her having been captured and put back into Novice White in the tower.
Mm-hmm.
That because that is when all of these lessons, all of these hard lessons she has had to learn, that's when they come into play. And she is in a lot of points, she's actually actively consciously recognizing that. She's connecting these dots. She's realizing I had to undergo this so that I could be strengthened to
Mm-hmm.
withstand this, so that I could stand up here and do this thing. And that was in the last couple of books that he wrote. So it does make me wonder,
But
to your
yeah,
point,
but then
how would it have come
Sanderson
across in
takes
your head?
over and she turns right back into that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
which I got a meme for that with Perrin because it happens with him too. But I might
Well,
bring that
yeah,
up.
that was my biggest gripe with his storyline, is it kind of him and Matt, it kind of felt like they reset and it was like we've we've already been over this. We've already had this resolution. We've already done this. Why are why does it feel like we're retreading the same ground? And it that actually you mentioned that kind of does feel in a lot of ways like that's what happens with Egwene too. It's like, well, wait a minute. We already went through this phase for
Mm-hmm.
her. Why and we had growth. Why does it feel like we're resetting and forgetting the growth we just had?
We could get to comments because I have something about one of Scott's that I thought about when I first read it.
Were there any other spoilery things, notes that you had?
Those are the three I had
Okay.
down.
Yeah, the only other thought I had while we were talking is when Min comes into things.
Oh
But I
yeah,
mean,
yeah, yeah.
we'll get more into that because she's the one. That's what I was referring to. She's the one who her big thing is that she helps Rand see that. She actually, I'm trying to remember when she says that out loud, because it's someone is talking about the negativity around Rand, and she's the one who speaks up and says it's about balance. Yes, when he's around, sometimes these negative things happen, and that's what he was thinking about in the previous book when they were, coming through. Is, yeah, this guy who had this refugee who had survived all these things, he trips on a tiny rock on flat ground and just falls in such a weird way he breaks his neck. 1 in a 2 million chance, but it happened because he was around this person who warps randomness. But at the same time, then these three people fell into a sinkhole full of vipers, and yet none of the bites managed to actually find skin. It's balance. Yeah, this bad thing happened, but this good thing happened too. This positive thing happened too. And she's the one who helps him start to see that.
There we go.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, we'll get there. That's part of the annoying
Yeah.
part of the story. But yeah, so this is the thing about men with me that everybody has to know going forward. If I had a person I made up in my head that was my fantasy girl, it was men. Because first of all, I read this stuff at a young age where I was prone to that kind of thing. But also,
Yeah.
if you've never boned and then had a philosophical discussion afterwards, you haven't lived, man. It's like the best thing ever. So yeah, so Min is my fantasy girl. Uh, so there is that.
She also brings in such a different dynamic from anyone else, especially anyone else around Rand. That she uh she's got a little bit of Harred Fel, but she also has the people skills. I guess we're not allowed to talk about that. I think we've talked about that before, that there's this long-term study that followed kids that tested high, the kind of GT or whatever you have, whatever program you have around where you are, where the gifted kids do extra stuff. So it followed these kids over, like, from elementary school into their professional lives. And so all of these kids had tested very high in math and science. But overwhelmingly, the boys ended up going into STEM fields, whereas a few of the girls did. Well, it's also because those girls who tested high in math and science also tested high in other things.
Mhm.
The boys didn't. So that's what Harred Fel is
Yeah.
he's that genius who looks at that stuff, but he can't translate it into normal speak. That's where Min comes in, because
Mhm.
she's not quite as smart as Harred Fel, but she has all these other skills.
She reads people.
Mhm.
I think it's somewhat of a
Mm.
metaphor that she reads their aura, because
Yeah,
she just
yeah.
reads people, period. And I think that's why I like her so much.
That's an interesting way to. Yeah, I hadn't thought about it in those terms before.
You know,
All right.
and okay, what, so we take a normal human trait and we go into a metaphysical world. It's no surprise that she's the one that can actually know you more than you know you.
Mhm. Yeah, it's an interesting thought.
All right, so let's go into the comments. See, I was taught by both parents that gentlemen treat women with courtesy. Yep. That's good. Uh, oh, let's see. I didn't see this comment the first time I went through. My first years in college, I attended a school that was an education college before they became commie factories. And we all knew those that can do, those that can teach, those that can do, and those that can't teach. I know that a little trite, but it's also true. Sometimes coaches don't play, right?
Mhm.
But but realistically, there is a just from the field I'm in, there's a balance. Sometimes you have to have a little bit of perspective from both ends. But part of that is what you just talked about, Heath, in translating it to the person you're talking to. And so you may know all the science, but if you've never done it, sometimes it's hard to talk to the person that you need to convey the knowledge to.
Yeah, that's weird. I'm seeing that there are 3 comments, but I'm only seeing 2 comments.
Yeah, because I went to the video but I went to the comments on your video analytics, and there's 3.
Hmm.
Okay,
But
so the one I just read is the one I couldn't see.
that's weird.
Yeah. Now the last one here, the one I wanted to comment more on, was Nynaeve learned to channel without knowing she was channeling. It was need, because she did that for so long she could not do it consciously. And Nynaeve has never been a surrenderer. Look how she wisdomed her village.
Yeah, I like that as a verb. That's a
Yeah, wisdom.
fitting.
Wisdomed is now a new word.
Yeah, for her it
But
is for sure.
yeah, so this is what got my brain going, because we do that. We have that. This is a concept already that exists. It's called neural inhibition. And the reason why there's neural inhibition is exactly why Aes Sedai are so afraid of wilders learning on their own. Because in this world, doing something on your own without knowing how you do it burns you out. Whereas in the real world, neural inhibition is that granny that picks up a car because a kid is trapped underneath. But the part of the story they don't tell you is that every tendon in her body popped, right?
Burned herself out. Yeah.
Yeah, she burned herself out. She's no longer a functioning human being because she did this exceptional act of strength that we actually all have in us. I could outlift Eddie Hall if I could turn the part of my brain off that turns my body off. The problem is, after I did it, I probably would be disabled for the rest of my life. And
What's that? There's a disorder where you don't feel pain, and it's incredibly dangerous.
it's almost a nil survival rate. It's so bad because you cannot feel the things that are dangerous to you. And
You're bleeding, huh? What? Yeah,
yeah,
how many times has someone said that to you and it's okay, but it's because you were doing something. You were so hyper focused on something you didn't realize you cut yourself. And then until someone points it out. All right, now imagine if that's all the time.
yeah,
That's not good.
yeah. So yes, this is actually a real human phenomenon. And the problem is she has developed a pattern where she can only do it reactionarily. So it's she has to find a way through the what they're calling the block, but is a mental trauma block, whatever caused it. And in this sense, in this world, I never really took it past the fact that she it's just something that your body knows is inherently dangerous. So it created a protection in the process, and you either need to be taught through it, but if you don't at the wrong time, if you end up tapping into it without being taught through it, then your body kind of creates a protectionary system to
Well,
it.
in with that idea, it's actually a double block. It's actually, it's the physiology and the psychology strengthening each other because it's not just under, in the way you're thinking about it, it's not just a physiological phenomenon, but then there's the psychological phenomenon of it's a trauma because this is something scary and bad. She doesn't want to, she cannot consciously comprehend this without causing herself psychological trauma, which we see when she comes face to face with it. When she's confronted with this in the eye of the world by Moraine, she refuses to accept it.
And this is an exploration that I would love to bring to someone like Jordan, who's not alive, to talk to him about it, because he's the only person that can answer this question. Is could we put together a pattern of your strength and the power versus the difficulty of the block? Because back to the lifting the car analogy, the greater the feat of strength, the more damaging it is, right? Nynaeve is the strongest woman to channel in this era up until a few people we meet later. And she has the most difficult block to open up. Theodrin, yeah, it was a hard block to come through, but she came through it relatively well. So, but she's also moderately mediocre in the power by the way they describe her. So, is your potential part of your physiological underlying block that builds? How much can this kill you versus what could be the end product in another situation?
All right. Well, that's a good place to end it. And theoretically we'll have more fun next time because we get back to Matt.
Yeah, we get back to I can wear my cowboy hat a little bit. But
Yeehaw.
uh the other part of it with Nynaeve is just to close it out. Uh the second half of that is the way she wisdomed her way through it. That's part of the reason why she's still alive. So her block is her own personality trait.
Yeah.
If she didn't have that personality to begin with, she'd be dead.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. All right. Well, that is all for this watch time. Wheel of time. And we will see y'all next time with some Matt, and I don't remember what else happens after that.
All right. Well, we'll see you next time. No disclaimers needed. We just talked about a book.